the South African police force have a gluttony of generals and an obesity of officers? Let's find out from Ian Cameron, the chairperson of Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Police. Welcome, Ian.
Good morning. Thank you, Chris.
According to replies received from the latest parliamentary questions, how many generals and how many brigadiers are there in the South African police force?
Yeah, so we recently asked questions in Parliament about the amount of senior officers. So what we did, we specifically classified it from brigadiers, major generals, lieutenant generals, and then obviously there's only one general, full general, which is usually the national commissioner. And currently that very national commissioner is on suspension. We then asked what the rand value of those senior officers would be. So before I give the numbers, let me just give context. I want to make sure that South Africans understand, or that we have a way of comparing or understanding what the value proposition is, or rather what the value or the return on investment is for the money that is paid for all of these extravagant positions. And when we asked the question, it was quite something that we got back. So in total, the South African Police Service has a number of 722 brigadiers and generals. Below that, we have a whole lot of colonels and so on. But the long and the short of it is that we spend on those senior officers nearly 3.6 billion rand to pay them and to maintain them. And I think the question that we need to ask is, what are we getting in return?
And what are we getting in return, Ian?
Well, if we look at the numbers at the moment, I like to compare it to some kind of a vehicle. So let's say we're paying for the top of the range 4x4 of some kind, and we are receiving the service of a broken down sedan that's meant to be used to do overlanding with. It's physically impossible. And without criticizing some of the good officers out there, to give you an idea of the challenges, and you and I have spoken about it, apart from what we're hearing at the Madlanga Commission, everything regarding corruption, etc. But, a unit like Cape Town Flying Squad recently, I think you and I spoke about it, they are at 40% vehicle strength. This morning I received a complaint of a police station, specifically in parts of the Cape Flats. I won't say the specific station, but that they don't have any R5 rifles, and they haven't had R5 rifles for several years. And they are expected to fight and take on extortionists with AK-47s while they have got old pistols. We have the cases of ballistic evidence not being submitted, and a DNA backlog of nearly 300,000 cases that has built up over time. So one must wonder exactly why we are paying what we are, 3.6 billion rand. And then we need to go and ask, but how many of these so-called senior members are actually there because they deserve to be there? We have a matter in the Winelands in the Western Cape where we actually have one of the district commissioners that's not a career police member. She became a brigadier immediately upon entry and was put into operational positions without the necessary qualifications. And to this day, and it's becoming clearer and clearer, that there is a decline in terms of performance in most of the areas where these types of appointments are meant or expected to perform. To give you even more of an idea, out of those 722 brigadiers and generals, almost 400 of them are stationed at national head office. So, and the other, another 166 are at provincial head offices. So, very few of these senior officers are on ground level. And it's important to say that, generally speaking, a major general, lieutenant general would not be doing the footbeat. But the long and the short of it is, what are they actually doing if we see the disarray and what's happening on ground level versus, what happens on a national level, or rather, what doesn't happen on a national level?
Ian, how many of these hundreds of top officers have had lifestyle audits done?
Well, this is the most interesting part, and it actually came from testimony at the Madlanga Commission. So there was a specific part at the Madlanga Commission, or a specific testimony, and Daily Maverick actually did a brilliant article on it where they spoke about the whole lifestyle audit process. And the report that they published earlier in July, they said that only 5 of 823 senior SAPS officers underwent lifestyle audits during 2024-25 financial year, and all 5 were cleared. Now, that means that only 0.6% of senior officers were actually identified in that report. And it basically means that the large majority, obviously more than 99% of the senior officers in the South African Police Service didn't undergo any kind of lifestyle audit and continue as per usual. The interesting thing is, the way that it was described to us in the portfolio committee was that lifestyle audits are taken very seriously. And yes, there are capacity constraints, but they are doing them and they're really pushing hard to get more done. While this testimony at the Madlanga Commission paints a very, very different story. And one must wonder whether it's not intentional, because 0.6% of your senior cohort that was or that underwent lifestyle audits tells me more of something, of someone being complicit versus someone actually wanting to do decent lifestyle audits. You know, I can't imagine that SAPS would be in the position that it's currently in had those lifestyle audits been properly done. And you need to understand, I just gave the overall number of brigadiers and generals together. But Chris, if you look at the detail numbers, SAPS has one full general. That's General Masemola, Fani Masemola. He's the only full general. Then we've got 20 lieutenant generals. We've got 123 major generals, which in my opinion is absurd. It is a totally, totally bloated structure. It just makes no sense whatsoever. We've got 578 brigadiers, and I haven't even started with colonels and lieutenant colonels. So we've got a very, very serious problem. And even though the number of brigadiers declined slightly since 2018, it's likely just due to retirement and not due to strange or unnecessary appointments.
And last time we spoke about how people like General Feroz Khan jumped ranks.
Yeah, so Khan is case in point. There are several more examples like Khan. I believe that the latest one that's been in the media over the past weekend is Colonel Dawood, whom also, from what I understand, had interesting ways of climbing ranks, or rather climbed the ranks in an interesting manner. But if we look at Khan specifically, he skipped the rank of uh, both lieutenant colonel, and he skipped the rank of brigadier. So he went straight from being a captain to a full colonel, and he went straight from being a full colonel to being a major general, and that in a very, very short space of time. You can imagine what this does to the morale of the good cops on the ground, because there are many people. I spoke to a member recently at one of the flying squad units. He's a sergeant. He's been a sergeant for 23, 24 years. And spending that amount of time in the same rank, but you're actually the one doing the job. You're a good and honest police member. you do the right thing, but you don't see any opportunities in terms of promotion or career growth, it's no wonder that they become despondent. You can imagine how it feels that you literally know for a fact that the chances of you seeing any kind of growth is little to zero. It seems that you either need to be well connected, not only politically, but strategically connected in parts of the police, or you need to be up to something that you shouldn't necessarily be busy with. And I know I could receive a lot of criticism for saying that, because the immediate thing would be, especially from a minister's office or from senior management of SAPS, but everyone's not like that. Well, the Madlanga Commission is case in point. It shows us what has happened due to the way appointments have been wrongly done.
Healthcare matters, but what matters most?
Having cover for the people who keep this business going.
Bonitas is there for you when it counts. Bonitas, medical aid for South Africa. Visit bonitas.co.za and find your plan.
Now, Ian, meanwhile, there is some controversy about the draft report of Parliament's Ad Hoc Committee into Police and Political Capture. Can you tell us what is happening there? Because some people feel that Special Leave Minister Senzo Mchunu is being protected.
Yeah, so I'm very, very concerned about how a narrative has been driven over the past week or two about the ad hoc committee's work. I saw that certain members of parliament, and I don't want to give them unnecessary publicity, so I'd rather not say the names. And I also saw that certain journalists said that someone like Mchunu was cleared, and that everyone that should have been held accountable was cleared. Now, that's totally false. There are absolutely no facts that they can substantiate that with. And let me tell you why. In the report, and I'm going to go through the list now, I actually set up a list regarding this. There are 18 substantive findings, and they address the conduct of named individuals, so no one just gets a free pass. They identify political, executive, and command accountability, and they recommend targeted referrals. So that's the first point, that anyone that's a critic of the report should actually go and look at the findings before they just make these ridiculous comments in the media, on social media, something like everyone was cleared, because it's simply not true. I honestly think that people who say that someone was just cleared, and I even listened to some of the members that at some stage says that they fundamentally disagree with the way that a report clears people. I think that they don't understand what their role or mandate is as members of parliament or of the ad hoc committee. This committee is not a judicial or a quasi-judicial committee. It's not a court or a commission of inquiry like the Madlanga Commission. It's not a disciplinary tribunal, and it's also not a criminal investigating body. So it, you know, we couldn't make that clearer from the beginning. It's what we constantly try to remind people of is what the role of such a committee is. So the purpose of the committee was parliamentary oversight, and that in itself is to establish what the evidence disclosed, so what was the evidence that was given to us, what we can identify as failures of accountability, that's number one, how we could make findings and recommend corrective or investigative action. So we can't just decide that someone is criminally liable or criminally guilty. We're not a quasi court, and we need to understand that. If you go look at the recommendations, they are extremely strong recommendations, and hear me when I say that the team of Parliament that has been drafting this report are extremely competent. And I've worked with many of them through the police committee as well. And trust me when I say they are on a extremely, extremely high standard of work.
Meanwhile, Ian, have you had a chance to look at that explosive affidavit made by the Inspector General of Intelligence, making headlines this morning?
Yeah, so I haven't actually seen the actual affidavit. I read the article that you're referring to, and it's incredible piece of work that's been done by Amabungani. Um, Interesting to me, two or three things that really stand out is that it seems that quite a few of the so-called stakeholders in this whole fight that's been playing out over the past 18 to 24 months, a lot of the stakeholders are political or strategic pawns to fight each other's battles with. So, the impression was created for quite some time, like the Divisional Commissioner of Crime Intelligence, Lieutenant General Kumalo, and the Inspector General of Intelligence was this is Imtiaz Fazel, um, that they were direct opponents of one another. And when you read this piece of work done by Amabungani, yes, there are things that were being investigated and so on, but it neutralizes the idea that there are just two, direct factions. What becomes extremely worrying is the apparent uh, interference by Minister Chaveni, who's the Minister for State Security in the presidency, in matters that do not concern her. That she was giving instruction to someone like the Inspector General, whom she's not meant to give instruction to. It also draws a bit more of a dark cloud over the on-holiday Minister Mchunu, extended holiday, sabbatical Minister Mchunu. So I think it puts a lot more pressure on the president. And in my opinion, if action had been taken immediately and clarity had been given immediately, we wouldn't be sitting in this mess. But it's because we constantly have this aversion for decision making. When I say we, I refer to the presidency especially. We've got this aversion about making decisions, and then things boil over in the end, and we sit in the situation that we're in at the moment. So this creates further distrust in senior state, the broader state policing, intelligence, criminal justice, and security space. And I think that this article is going to be shared far and wide, and likely may see some kind of action to force the testimony of the Inspector General at the Madlanga Commission, et al. Because if we look at the allegations and what is shared in that story, I think there are many missing pieces of the puzzle that could be filled in if he is allowed to testify.
Indeed. Ian, just going back to the bloated state of the South African Police Force, how should it be restructured?
So to me, something that became a resolution of Parliament at the end of 2024, it was meant to be done in 2025, was the competency audit, a skills audit that should have been done of senior management. But then all of this chaos with the Madlanga Commission and everything started. So obviously it didn't happen yet. But that's where I would start. I would start with a lifestyle, let's say a broader integrity audit, where you include both lifestyle and a skills audit. You determine who is giving you return on investment. And then once you've done that with your top structure in terms of major generals, lieutenant generals, and obviously the national commissioner, then you can move to the rank of brigadier. And I'm convinced that once you've cleaned up that part of the structure, a lot more will siphon through. Obviously, it will take time. The rot in the South African Police Service is so serious and has built up over such a long time that it's not something you're going to change overnight. But that's where I would start. You could use something like the Madlanga Commission as a stepping stone to point you in the right direction of where you should possibly start. But I would certainly start with that, and then you need to clean up. Sometimes you wouldn't necessarily be able to immediately sack someone, but then you'd need to have some kind of a separation package, and rather get the wrong stakeholders out of SAPS instead of keeping them there for the sake of keeping the peace.
Ian, anything else you would like to add going forward when you get back to Parliament?
No, Chris, I think when we start with Parliament in the next 2 weeks, the big things coming up is the gang inquiry, extreme, bloodshed over the past week again, between 15 and 20 miners that were shot just over the last week in the Cape Flats. And that's just touching on gang violence issues, not on all the others. So the gang inquiry, I think, is of critical importance, and we've got a huge responsibility to ensure that it adds value. And then secondly is the first briefing on the South African Police Service Amendment Bill, a bill that's been coming since 2012, so 14 years old, something that should have been tabled a long time ago, should have been processed already, referred back if need be. I think there are significant red flags in the bill. It speaks to further centralization of policing. It speaks to further or more decision-making by a national commissioner over the rest. And I actually think it couldn't come at a better time at the moment, because the Madlanga Commission process and even the Ad Hoc Committee at Parliament points us in the right direction in terms of saying we should decentralize and ensure that we have got the right checks and balances in place, and that further centralization could actually make things far worse. So yeah, those are the two really major things that are up and coming. I wouldn't be surprised if somehow the Pala matter makes some kind of a return to the police committee once again, with regards to police and IPID's handling of the Pala inquiry, but we will handle that when we get there.
Thank you. That was Ian Cameron, Chairperson of Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Police, speaking to Biz News. I'm Chris Steyn. Thank you, Ian.
Thanks, Chris.
Start your day a step ahead. Biz News Insider. It delivers the business stories that matter every morning straight to your inbox. Sharp, fast, and free. Subscribe now. In uncertain times, good information is priceless. The Biz News Conference is heading back to the Drakensberg. Join me, Alec Hogg, from the 11th to the 14th of August for BNC 9. Champagne Sports Resort, where it all began, and where our community gathers for honest conversations, smart investing insights, and direct access to some of South Africa's sharpest minds. Come and rub shoulders with the best we've got. 28 keynote speakers, 3 days. Seats are available now. Book your seat by clicking the link in the description.